Hey guys, how's it going? Coderman here. In today's video, we're going to look at my wife's 2020 Hyundai Palisade Limited. So we've had this vehicle for about 6 months, and the reason why we had to get a new vehicle is actually quite comical, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But I wanted to go over some of the driving features as well as the seating and the general reason why we upgraded to this vehicle. So as you can see from the exterior, it is quite striking in regards to its design. At least I think it is. I think it's nicely designed. The lighting's good, the lines, everything's just really well put together. It doesn't look like a typical SUV. It gets closer to that van size, but it doesn't look like a van. And that was a really big thing for myself as well as my wife. We're just not big fans of vans, so that's not what we wanted. So inside the interior, you have a lot of nice leather. I mean, for a Hyundai, it looks really nice. As you can see, we have a whole bunch of car seats and car seat accessories. And then we just have the one captain's chair right there where my son sits, and he, of course, does not need a car seat. It has a really nice infotainment center, which I'll go into more detail on the drive. Blind spot wise, it's not too bad. It is an SUV, so of course you have that factor. You have to factor that in. A couple quick things on the interior before we get started. So you can actually close the cup holders if there's nothing in it, and get rid of my daughter's bow. And you got a whole bunch of space in here. And then of course, if you have something of value, you can close it and it looks a lot cleaner and it protects whatever happens to be in there. So there's a lot of compartments, a lot of spaces. And one of the weirdest things in here that my wife actually found, but is cool for parents, is if I push right here and drop this down. So that's actually a mirror so that you can see the back and you can see the kiddos without having to turn around. And then of course it has a moonroof. It's actually panoramic, so it goes all the way back there's a brake here, which kind of stinks, but it's not too bad. All right, so here we are in the driver's seat of the Hyundai Palisade, and you can tell just by looking around, it's obviously is a modern setup. And you have your standard infotainment system. If I were to actually connect my phone, which I can actually do real quick. So it actually has a wireless charging system. However, for iPhone, you have to plug it in, and that's just because of Apple Play. The way that Apple Play requires you to have your phone plugged in unless they pay the licenses for wireless. So if I go ahead and click media, which is on ours, that's how it's set up. I have it put as a hotkey here. Let's not get a content flag. And I'm basically I'm inside of in CarPlay. So I have everything right there. And I can move about as I need. It has a Hyundai app that actually, when you click on that, it just goes back to the main screen of the controls. Apparently U2 is on my phone still, which is hilarious. And yeah, you just have your basic controls. What I like about this is everything is still knobs. So even though everything's really a touchscreen, you just still have knobs for your tuning and your radio. You have your different drive modes, which I usually drive in sport mode, and it does a cool little animation to get you set up there. And really, I think the weirdest thing when I first got in this, when my wife bought it, was that there's no transmission controls, there's just buttons here, and it's kind of like a fighter jet in a way. I've now kind of gotten used to it, and having this whole open space where you have all of your cup holders and everything is just really flat. I think it just looks really nice. So yeah, that's basically, the infotainment side, the driver's view. A couple of quick things that are neat to this car specifically. If you look inside the speedometer side and the tachometer side, if I throw the left blinker on, I actually get a video, and it's live. It doesn't move or anything, but if I was moving, you would see it. And up in the top, it'll still give you your RPMs, and then this one over here, it gives you your speed. And I gotta say, this is really useful for merging. Obviously, you still wanna look in your mirrors, and this also eliminates blind spot, because as you can see, it's basically starting from the essentially the middle of the car back. On most cars, that's a blind spot. So this kind of just eliminates that blind spot. Now, aside from the blind spot cameras, I think the weirdest thing that I found when we got this car and didn't even know it was here is if I come over here, there's actually this option that says driver talk. What this does, I don't know if you can hear it on the audio, it's actually echoing now. I'm actually talking to the rear of the car, which, you can see is not that far away, but it actually lets you have a conversation and you don't have to yell. And then the kids or whoever can talk back to you. It's just an open mic two-way. So yeah, so I think that's a pretty good overview of, the interior of the car. Like I said, the seats and all that. So you know, let's now go take this thing for a drive. And of course, this isn't going to be a high performance drive because it is a massive bus, as my wife calls it. It still has some pickup, and I'll just kind of give you my thoughts on the ride comfort. So it has an 8-speed transmission, which in sport mode, it actually does kick in pretty fast. And we did have a couple snowstorms already. I've already used snow mode. And what it really does for me, I think, is it just kind of limits the slipping of the the wheels. And I think it possibly puts it into 4-wheel all the time, but I'm not positive on that. But otherwise, it's all-wheel drive. So, I mean, you know, it's not going to win any times on the Nürburgring. And in fact, if you tried to go into a corner going that fast, you'd probably flip the thing over. But it has some pretty good pickup, and I think that, you know, overall for what you would be using it for, which is a kid hauler, I think it runs really well, and it's comfortable. It has nice perforated leather. The interior has leather. This is kind of like actually this is leather as well, and then up here is kind of like a plasticky, I think it's like pleather or something. You know, it has some nice trim pieces, and especially for a Hyundai, you know, I mean, like I know they have the Ecos or whatever it is they spun off, but Hyundai's really kind of been up in their game, and I found out part of the reason for that was because they actually have one of the Audi designers, or a few of the Audi designers. So it's cool to see that they're actually up in their game when it comes to their interiors and their overall, you know, car designs. The exterior of this car, people either love it or hate it. It depends. Me personally, I like the front of this with the rear of the Kia. So if you don't know, the Kia Telluride is the sister of this car, or really, I mean, I don't know if it's a sister, but it looks almost the same. Has a couple little differences inside, and the biggest one is that it has a more, I would just say, goofy front end. And if you have a Kia, I'm not hating on it, it's not for me. My perfect car would be the front end of the Hyundai Palisade with the rear of the Kia Telluride. So it'd be interesting to see in the future, maybe, you know, 2021, 22, 3, whatever, maybe they'll merge those and also fix a couple of the quirks in this one, like the bench seat, which I mentioned, which my wife still hates. And honestly, if a 2022 came out with the bench seat, she probably would want to upgrade to it. Go head off the back roads and get on the highway, and you can hear the ride, hear the ride noise as well as the comfort. I mean, who doesn't love just downshifting in whatever car you're in? You can peg 4,000 RPMs with the V6. Oh, M3. I want to buy that, by the way. The guy's from Illinois, and he just has it sit there. I don't know if he even drives it. All right, so let's get a takeoff. So she does 0 to 60 eventually. I don't know what the official times are. I'm sure for an SUV it may not even have official times, but it runs really well. And so now if I wanted to change lanes, I got a car coming up on the side. You should be able to see it. If I click that on, you can start to see the headlights, and that would just tell me, whether I can do that turn or not. For those colder weather viewers, the car does run really well in snow. I would recommend putting snow tires on it if you're going to be driving it in a lot of snow often. This has all seasons, which, as we know, are pretty much called no seasons, but they work really well. My wife drives to work, and she had no problems. We had the Christmas week, we had some snow, and we also had no problems. And sitting at red lights with a GoPro strapped to your forehead has got to be the funniest thing. I hope one day I end up on somebody's TikTok filming a video. Now, if you were just driving along and you didn't want to futz around with, shifting, of course, if I stop doing it, it's just going to take over. It'll switch into drive mode as you see, and then it will just kind of, go through the transmission. I'm sure it's down in like 6th or 7th gear. If I want to, maybe merge or get into, get out of the way of something, I can drop it down, just like in a manual car, kick it back up, stop interacting with it, and it'll switch over. Range on this car is about 380 to 400 miles, depending on how you drive it. As you can see right now, I'm kind of hammering on it, so I'm getting 12.9 miles to the gallon. I think my wife averages around like 20 to 25 the way that she drives. And it's a V6, so it doesn't guzzle gas. It also has a pretty big tank. I think it's about 18 gallons, so you don't have to fill up all that often. As far as seat comfort from the driver's perspective, the passenger or the captain chairs in the back, they're very comfortable. Because of COVID, we haven't been able to do a long road trip just yet. Probably the furthest we've gone is maybe 3 hours, and there was no complaints. Kids fall asleep, teenager falls asleep, my wife falls asleep, and I'm driving. And it's actually kind of funny because this has some rudimentary, automatic cruise control, and it'll actually, like, say for instance, if I were to enable it right now, it would follow this ambulance at speed depending on the distance I've set it at. But if you let go of the wheel, or if, sometimes I'll drive and I'll have just a couple fingers on the wheel, just like this, whatever, it actually will pop up a little coffee cup on the screen there and basically tell you to be alert or maybe take a break. So yeah, let me go ahead and put the cruise control on, and I'll set it to what I'm going right now. If I were to hit this button here to change the distance, I want to get closer to that car, in this case the ambulance. It tells me that it's tracking that car. If I were to change lanes, or if that car were to move or whatever, it would stop tracking and would just go the speed that I want. In this case, it's just following that car, and we're coming up to a red light, so it should actually start to slow down. And of course, because this is a Tesla, or not a Tesla rather, I have my foot on the brake just in case. But see, I'm not actually hitting the brake right now. It's slowing down, slowed down to about 40 miles an hour. And now it's picking up again, and I'll move my leg. I don't have my foot on the gas at all, or the brake. Is it a self-driving car? No. Is it kind of useful when you're on the highway going on a longer trip? Yes. You obviously have to stay alert, but another thing that you may or may not notice, and I'm not going to do it right next to a car because I've had some lackluster results with it, is it will actually turn the wheel for small turns, and I will actually just let my hands off and it will stay in the lane. But sometimes it will drift on that lane and it'll come back here, and it'll basically will like play ping pong, which, as you can imagine, if a cop was behind you, is not a good idea. But see, like right now, it's actually turning, and now the ambulance is slowing down. So see, now it's warning me because I don't have my hands on the wheel, and in a second it's going to disengage because it's like, what the heck are you doing? And there's nothing here, so it's now let go of me, and I would have crashed into that wall if I hadn't been paying attention. So it is definitely not a self-driving car, but it is a cool feature, and when you're in traffic, it's actually really useful. So I'm going to take back over because there's no cars here. So you've seen the interior, you've seen the exterior. I'm sure you're asking yourself, who is this car for? Now, if you're actively looking for it, it's probably for you. But really, this car is for the larger family or somebody that transports a lot of people. It has 8 seats with the bench or 7 seats with the captain's chairs. You don't need all that if it's just you and your wife and a child. In our case, my wife and I, we have a total of 5 children right now, and 3 of our own, 2 foster. And we had the Nissan Murano, and we literally ran out of space. Like, there was no more space. We actually couldn't take a placement for the baby that we have until we changed cars, simply because we didn't have a car to put her in. So her car was getting up there in mileage. It already had a replaced transmission, under warranty at like 30,000 miles. As an aside, I do not recommend that car that much. It was a fun car, but it had a lot of really dumb quirks, and I dropped a transmission at 30,000 miles. So this car is for that larger family, or if, let's say you're gonna have a growing family, either you're adopting, fostering, kinship, taking in a family member, whatever it happens to be. If you are a soccer parent or a sports parent and you wanna transport a lot of kids, but you don't wanna buy a Suburban, or like an Escalade or something like that, this is a smaller frame car. It does fit in, small parking garages. My wife parks in one for her work. Really, the only thing is when you're driving this, it is a little bit wider than your standard car, so you start to feel like you're drifting out of your lane. After a while, you realize you're not, and you kind of just, you go with it and you don't get too concerned. So even now, just driving, I would say normal speed, I've already added about 2.5 miles per gallon to my actual drive. And if I were to go ahead and put it into comfort, it's going to lower the RPMs, and subsequently you'll get better gas mileage, but you also lose some performance. So you have to obviously be mindful of that. And then there's some other versions as well. Eco, I don't even know what it does. Perhaps my wife has used it. I imagine it's going to be like driving like an electric car, but with no torque. And I'm sure you get great gas mileage, but you'd have no performance. So I'm not sure how well the bumps and potholes pick up in the audio. But overall, the car is really quiet. It has a little bit of road noise on the highway, which is expected for a large SUV. But as far as the bumps, you don't really feel them. They kind of just roll over it. Of course, I'm coming from the GT4 with sport suspension, so I feel that in my bones, whereas this is very comfortable. If you're coming from a high luxury car and came into this, you probably would notice more of it. So in addition to the automatic cruise control or automated cruise control, it also has blind spot detection, and it also has one feature that I'm sure is really useful, but for the way that I drive, and maybe it's a little, let's say unsafe or more aggressive or whatever, if you are behind a car on the highway and you go into the other lane, and even though you have your blinker on, if you get probably from here to where that car is right now in front of me, it will kick on the braking system. It won't actually brake the car, but it will alert you that it's going to. And the first time that it does it, the wheel shakes, the display goes red. It's quite unnerving, and quite honestly, I almost crashed into the car in front of me just because it caught me off guard. The other setting that I have turned off when I'm driving, I think my wife uses it, is lane keep assist, which, similar to how it's doing it for the cruise control, it will try to keep me in between these two lanes. The problem with that is two problems. One, lanes aren't clearly marked, so sometimes the car drifts and gets confused. And the other more concerning thing is if you're going down the road and there's a car parked over here, say like a delivery truck or a broken down vehicle, and I want to come over like this to get around it, the car will actually complain and start to pull the wheel back because it's trying to keep you in the lane. The problem is you will crash into the back of the car that's sitting at the side of the road. All right, so I'm just gonna pull in here real quick and show you the cameras. So like most cars, it has your cameras. You have a view over here, and it kicks on a front camera and a rear camera, a surround camera. And then if I throw it in reverse, it shows you your guided lines where the wheel is, or where the wheel's pointed, and you can very easily, without looking back, although you should probably look in your mirrors a little bit, it tells you you're close, you can completely park. And then we have the car set that when you engage the park, it automatically unlocks all the doors so that the kids can actually get out without you having to go around the car and open them all. So a couple of additional controls that this has, it has heated and cooled seats, it has heated steering wheel, has your camera, which I mentioned, it has parking sensors, which you heard when it was beeping. It has auto start stop, which in sport mode actually gets disengaged, which I prefer, because for me, when I'm at a light and it comes to a stop and I want to get going again, the first press of the gas pedal is turning the car on. The second press or subsequent holding is when it starts to go. And for me, it's a little unnerving just because I feel like if I had to get out of the way, going back to my motorcycle days, I immediately need to get out of the way. I don't really want to have to remember that I have to hit it twice to be able to get up and out of the way. So I'll quickly show you one of the apps for the car, and that's called BlueLink. So as you can see, it's my wife's car. My phone knows it. It has a picture of the car. I can go to vehicle status. So now it tells me that the car is parked, the engine is on, the hood is closed, climate control is off, and the doors are unlocked. If I go over to the other screen, I can remote start the car. I can set it into different modes. So I can basically, depending on the summer and the winter, and then I can have some presets, or I can just start it without presets. And then if I go to remote actions, I have the ability to, obviously flash the lights, remote unlock, lock, remote stop, remote start. Remote start is great. You can do it from the key fob as well. Remote stop is also great because you cannot do that from the key fob. And this is good. So if you start the car and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, the kids aren't ready, you don't have to go out into the freezing cold. You can actually just stop the car and not waste a bunch of gas. And then the maps button, it actually gives you some locations for some favorite destinations, Hyundai dealers, collision repair center, nearby fuel. So if I click on that, it will show me based on where I am. Let's say I needed fuel desperately, I can actually say send to car. So it's now telling me that it's downloaded the Maple Street Gulf. So I say set as destination.
The route guidance will start now.
And it's automatically is navigating me to that location. I use Waze for everything, but this is useful just because you can quickly navigate to a destination, find it on your phone, send it to the car. So there you have it, the 2020 Hyundai Palisade. Hopefully you found this review useful. Hopefully it answered some common questions on the car, as well as maybe some things that you didn't know that the car had. And hopefully it helps you decide if this is a car that you like, or if you're just a fan of my content and you wanted to watch it. I appreciate you checking it out. If you have any questions on the car or curious of the other cars that we looked at, leave a comment below. If you enjoyed this video and you like cars, especially a Porsche GT4, then go ahead and please subscribe, hit that like button, and leave a comment if you have any questions.